I am going to introduce Kevin Robertson, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Acumen, who's going to be talking about keeping off the front page. Now, Kevin's cybersecurity career spans 15 years across many roles in significant organizations. As a lead engineer in the RAF's deployable cybersecurity team, he provided support to airfields across the globe. And at Cisco, he supported clients including the UK government, Ministry of Defence, Societe Generale, BT and Rolls-Royce. He also was the lead in the in-country security architect on the Qatari government's cybersecurity framework for the 22 Football World Cup. Subsequently, he has provided strategic security support to other blue chip organizations, both as an employee and consultant, and most recently leading Silver Cloud and now Acumen as their Chief Operating Officer. Kevin, take it away.
Thank you very much. Just check everyone can hear me okay on the mic. Excellent. Okay. I can also hear myself on the headphones, hence why I've taken them off. It's quite disconcerting. So, Acumen Cyber, how I manage SOC will keep your organization out of the news. What I'm trying to cover today is there's kind of a few different things. So, some of the mistakes that I think a lot of organizations make is around, investing in technology, but then forgetting people to operate in them, how to use them, things like that. So I'm going to talk about how a proper security operations center would actually do that. That can be either in your business or it can be outsourced to an MSSP, like ourselves. I was meant to have a co-presenter today from Elastic, a chap called Nick Palmer. So Nick is a fantastic engineer, just not really one for public speaking. But if anyone does want to talk to him, he is at our stand, which is B12 just over there. And he's also got some demos and things like that can run you through of not just the Elastic platform, but how we leverage it and how you could leverage it internally in your business. So skip through a lot of this because I've obviously had a very good introduction, but a little bit of, a bit background. But I was also head of security at the Ardonna Group. So Ardonna Group is one of the biggest independent insurance brokerages in the UK. They aren't publicly listed. If they were, they'd be FTSE sort of 60, 70, somewhere in that region. About 10,000 employees. Post all that as well, I started my own security consultancy business that has then since went on to become what is now Acumen Cyber. If anyone wants to hear a little bit more about what we do, as well as what I'm covering today, again, stand B12, more than happy to walk you through. So, I'm going to cover what I think are the four key components. You'll have seen this previously probably as three. So, the three being the people, process, and the technology. That is quite commonplace, and that's kind of been the trifecta of security operations probably for the last 15, 20 years. But now there's a little bit of an additional one. There'll be lots and lots of talks today around AI and machine learning and things like that, that a couple of years ago I would have said were marketing buzzwords and were designed to give presentations and things like that. However, now, done properly, with automation done properly, this becomes arguably one of the most key things that your security operations center will put in. To put that in perspective, we have a team of 15 engineers. We ingest over 6 billion events every month. That is accumulated into about 25,000 alerts. But of those alerts, the amount that we tune out or the amount of we automate away, is quite significant. So that basically frees us up to look at the really juicy stuff. So if we cover each one of these in turn, so when it comes to people, so technology would have made sense as a starting point because I think that's where most organizations actually start. You buy the tech or you invest in the tech, but you actually don't have the people to sort of run that. So one thing which is often made still today is IT teams becoming cybersecurity teams overnight. I don't know if anyone wants to admit to this, but how many people in the room who now work in security previously worked in IT and almost gradually kind of was given a role rather than actually wanting to do that, rather than studying that, rather than researching that, it just became almost a fall guy for the organization. That still happens even at very big organizations where the CTO or the head of IT or the IT director all of a sudden is in charge of cybersecurity as well. Now those two things could often be at odds with each other, certainly in my opinion, because from a tech point of view and from an IT point of view, your job is to keep the business running, is to make availability better, keep redundancy up, all of those things, trying to make processes more available to either your organization or your customers, whereas the security side of that coin can often be seen as trying to do almost the opposite. There's an old joke that's not very funny, but I'll tell it anyway. The most secure server is the one that's turned off. That's what your security guy, if that's all you see, will want to do. So even though there should be a separation of that skill set, cybersecurity should be treated as its own domain, its own aspect. It should also be seen as an enabler of the business. It's not something that should be seen as constant fighting battle between the rest of the organization. We need to keep the business running, just have a different way of doing it. And even if you did then decide that, well, okay, we do need specialist resource in-house, we need to build a security team, hiring people in today's market is not easy, especially if you are Scottish based, especially if you want people in the office, local, it's incredibly difficult. And I can tell you that because I think I've hired everyone in Scotland over the last 6 months. There's no one left. And then things like training is very, very, very important. If you're a big tech organization and you've got maybe training platforms, let's say, or even training investments, you use stuff like O'Reilly are over there, fantastic organization, a lot of good resources, good books that cover a wide range of fields. But it's not always enough. To actually properly keep up to date on cybersecurity stuff, you need to be doing proper dedicated security training courses, resources. You need to be using the right websites and just doing it right. It's its own sort of niche training field as well. And for big organizations, they don't often see that. Even if you've got a small security team, 3, 4, 5 people, it's unlikely they're going to get the focus to kind of grow, as they need. And then you also need a kind of collaborative environment. So a single person isn't going to be able to actually, boil the ocean, to use a term. Even if you are a 500, 600 user business, employee organization, and you hire a CISO or you hire an InfoSec manager or someone like that, there's only going to be ever so much that person can do. They'll be able to tackle one side of the problem, perhaps, looking at your policies, looking at all your governance, trying to align to a framework, but they're not going to be the 24/7 SOC. They're not going to be, the person that's going to be doing review or design calls for your public cloud environment. You're not going to really get that unicorn single employee. So you actually need a team of people, and not just hire a single resource and tick a box. Then when we talk about processes, it's often a similar kind of story. So being proactive is quite key. What again a lot of organizations do is they carve it up, predominantly in my opinion, into two kind of buckets. One, it's either that our policies or controls aren't good enough, so they look at how they can try and paperwork their way out of the problem, so they can try and tick boxes and tick frameworks and go for ISO 27001 and things like that. All great things to do, but not in isolation. That has to be part of a wider and more robust kind of framework. Or they then go down the key of, well, okay, let's put a SOC in, which sounds fantastic, but that SOC really is only there to do or to deal with one incident every quarter. It's not proactively doing things like threat hunts. It's not proactively giving you recommendations or tuning out your detections or putting in new detection logic or anything like that. So trying to view security as an ongoing problem and a proactive problem, really is the way forward. Playbooks as well, so our runbooks. Every single threat that you would ever get in an organization is probably going to be very different, or there's probably going to be certain nuances. But that doesn't mean that you can't prepare for the most common ones. For example, some people in this room will have an incident response plan, they'll have a business continuity plan, they'll have a disaster recovery plan. All 3 of those maybe written technically in the same language, but do they talk to each other? Do they actually work together? Who knows? Have you ever sat down and worked out, the 10 most likely scenarios that would put your business offline? I can almost guarantee that a good chunk of those are probably going to be either cybersecurity related, technology related, anything like that. And then, more importantly, have you worked out what you should do in that event of that incident, and have you tested it? And continuous improvement. So every time you do have some of these incidents or something like that, there then needs to be a kind of lessons learned process. Now, if you're an internal team, small team, 1 person, 2 person, you'll be going from one incident to the next. There will be no time for that kind of breather moment in between. But I think it is important that people try and find time to make sure that, once bitten, twice shy. You can't continually deal with the same outcomes without putting in any kind of improvements or lesson learned. Technology. So my favorite slide, because this is where everybody starts, and most people in the room will have looked at tools and bought tools and hoped to tick a box and solve a problem, but it just, especially nowadays, it doesn't always work like that. I don't have stats on the slide, which I should have done, which would have been useful, but you can go to any of the technology vendors out here, many of which we partner from, and they will give you real stats, like we block proactively 99% of attacks or 99.9% of attacks or threats. That's fantastic. That remaining 1% that isn't blocked, that accounts for over 50% of actual serious security incidents. So it's not just about trying to throw stats at from that point of view, but it's about understanding the tech you're putting in and knowing how to work it and knowing how to scale it. So best in breed across the board. So what I mean by that is, and it's kind of goes in line with the next slide, but the reason why we say best in breed is, pick a solution to solve a singular problem. If you have vulnerabilities on your endpoints, or you foresee that you have quite a weak presence on our endpoints or servers or something like that, then you should look for a tool that solves that problem. If you have a network security issue, or there's a web browsing issue, or your emails are you should do the same thing, in my opinion. Now, the reason why that seems and sounds difficult is it means going and talking to 50 vendors, to POC 5 products, to do X, Y, Z, that's often not really palatable. So a lot of the times people go down a single vendor solution. They will go to insert big vendor here, and they will get every single tool that they've got, which is an email security platform, a web proxy, endpoint detection response, maybe it's a SIEM tool, etc. And some of those tools will be fantastic. They will be 10 out of 10 out of the box, the best in the market. And the other ones will be hot garbage, right? It's going to be a complete different end of the scale. Now, I will not pick on any vendor there, but that's where you can, you can make mistakes, in my opinion, without going down that best of breed approach. Now, the challenge then becomes, well, if we don't get the single vendor and we don't get a single magic dashboard, then what do we do? Because we can't correlate events and we can't, manage it quite easily. But that's where you need to be looking at proper integration now. There's not a security platform on the market that's been developed in the last 3 or 4 years that doesn't have an API that's publicly available or accessible, or doesn't have the ability to do stuff programmatically or using automation in some capability. So for me, you can actually go down the best of breed approach, spend a bit of money, a bit of time on making those talk to each other, and ultimately get a much better outcome. And then choose something you can build on. So you don't want to go down the route of something which is 10 out of 10 today, but has no real vision or has no real roadmap for where it's going to go. This kind of space, you'll hear this from almost every vendor in the room, but it changes constantly. It's not the same 1 year to the next, not the same 1 month to the next. Sometimes there's always a new problem to solve, that sometimes a new vendor try and throw a new tool at you for, or a new service or a new solution. So you need to be choosing platforms, in my opinion, that you can build on, that aren't just solving a problem on day one and then goes away 6 months down the line. Now, automation. So this one, again, could spend all day talking about this, and there's some presentations on AI and how that works. But, for me, being able to automate things, one of the first things it's going to do is enable you to respond a lot quicker than you would normally. One example I can give of how we use it in our security operations center is if we have a detection on an endpoint, via CrowdStrike or one of our EDR platforms, it then will automatically do a couple of the stuff that we know is going to be useful. They'll zip it all up, send it to AWS into an S3 bucket, and then ingest straight into our SIEM platform, ready for investigation. So by the time an analyst gets a ticket into our dashboard, they know that in 2 or 3 minutes, they're going to all have the first half an hour of investigation done. Everything will be at their fingertips. And that kind of automation to do properly takes, maybe takes 100 hours to develop for the first time round. But if you're doing that for 1,000 incidents, 30 minutes a year, that's 500 hours before you know it. So using it just to make stuff quicker is often a great result in and of itself. And accuracy as well. So how many times do you come across human errors or things like typos, or they've quarantined the wrong endpoint or done X, Y, Z? Whereas if you use some kind of automated method to do it, it almost eliminates human error. I say almost, there's still obviously the risk of that, but if you're clicking a button or running a script or running a program to do a complex series of tasks, you're much more likely for that to be accurate. The pessimist in the room will say, well, you're either right all the time or wrong all the time, so you do need to be testing and assuring any of the stuff that you put in production. And then with all this magical 3 hours in the day, you can then start to focus on the tough stuff. So all of your security engineers and security analysts now are going to be freed up to look at, rather than 100 incidents a day, maybe they do 5. But the 5 they do are the ones that are really difficult, require a lot of legwork, and you really, really need to get into the weeds to do that. Again, could talk all day about that. And even though I probably lambasted the sort of GRC bit at the start, that doesn't mean it's not something you should do. So you should be aligning to a framework. And when I say a framework, I absolutely don't mean it has to be something that you go and do off the shelf. It doesn't have to be CIS controls, it doesn't have to be ISO 27001 or NIST CSF even, which I will cover, but it should be something that if you get your business goals from a cybersecurity point of view to 10 out of 10, what does that mean? Well, it means we've identified all of our assets, we track them in this way, we've put all these tools in place. Basically just start with a plan. What does good look like before we start going to all the vendors around here, buying tools, buying products, buying services, what actually you're trying to achieve. And one of the very key things to do that, I don't know the split in the room of who's IT and who's more business focused, but make sure you guys talk the same language. I've been in too many rooms where you talk to the board or the execs and they want this service running or this part of the business to run, and you go to the IT team and they're spending all their time trying to keep up a server that nobody uses anymore. So make sure those functions talk to each other. What keeps your business running and what's actually important for your revenue lines. One good example is a bar and restaurant business who have POS systems, so processing all their transactions in bar and restaurants using POS systems that, if the internet goes down or if there's a ransomware attack on them, they just can't process payments anymore. They do not have they do not have cash anymore. It's cashless completely in the majority of the restaurants. POS systems go offline. That's a major issue. There's no investment made in that side of the business. That is seen as transactional. A till goes wrong, we swap it out. We've got ones and vans. They were spending all their money on their HQ. They want their finance system running better internally. They want analytics, this, that, and the other. As soon as we point out the issue of none of that actually keeps your revenue lines running, it's all of this over there, their complete mindset is totally flipped. And that's one instance where business not really talking to IT or tech. So I mentioned there as well, so individual organizations obviously aligned to some kind of framework. I'm showing the NIST cybersecurity framework here as a good starting point. That doesn't mean you wouldn't collaborate and use others and kind of put your own spin on it. I think it's also important that MSSPs start to do that as well. So one of the things that we try and do is that even if you're, 27001 or something like that, we're going to have our own almost internal rating of you as a client. And what we are going to do is kind of identify all the different key bits and start to point out areas of improvement. And that isn't necessarily, just so that we can try and upsell or try and cross-sell some kind of product or service or whatever. Oftentimes we're pointing you at partners. We aren't experts in policy management, control, GRC, anything like that. But it does give you almost a kind of, I didn't think about that type moment, which a lot, that I learn every day. I've been doing this 15 years. I think almost everyone in the room probably learns every day. It is a moving target. So yeah, my point is here, align to a framework. Doesn't have to be one off the shelf. Build your own if you have to, but why not beg, borrow, and steal where you can? Okay, and then often, I've obviously given quite a lengthy pitch there on all these bells and whistles. Won't that break the bank? I think traditionally it would have done. I mean, if you go back 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, the only organizations that had, let's say, a 24/7 SOC was your banks and your critical national infrastructure and your really, really big players. Whereas now, again, to steal a Gartner stat, which everyone have their opinion on Gartner, take it with a pinch of salt, but they actually put a paper out in 2020 that they said 50% of organizations globally will have an MDR service or managed detection response service, so some element of a SOC. They actually revised by 2025. So by 2025, 50% of organizations. They revised that last year to 60% because more and more organizations are finding cost-effective ways to get some element of 24/7 cover, whether that's on their endpoints, whether that's on their cloud environments, whether that's elsewhere. So one of the things you can obviously do is look at MSSPs. We're a great example of an organization that deploys tens of thousands of licenses and agents to customers. You come to us, the pricing you're going to get is that pricing, right? We're already done the hard work and done the tiered part. So even if you're buying 100 licenses from us, you can get it at a quarter of the price of what you can going direct to a vendor. I will say we don't sell licenses, we sell services, right? Everything we do is kind of baked in, but I'll let the sales team give you that pitch. So that is one thing to think about. And traditional SIEM platforms can be very, very expensive. So not saying that you need a SIEM necessarily to run a SOC or need a SIEM to do everything in your environment, but it is a big important part of it. Now, most of them, or certainly the bigger ones, are going to price you either on gigabits per day, events per second, stuff like that. Now, one how are you even going to work that out? If you're a small team, you probably don't even know what your log ingestion would be. If you've never had one of these services before, you would literally be, finger in the air and hoping for the best. So you're better off, in my opinion, using something that's a little bit more progressive. So, you can price on assets. So 10 servers is X. Doesn't matter if you throw 100 gig a day at us, that kind of is set in stone. Or you can price per users, or you can price somehow based on infrastructure in some way, shape, or form. It's one thing that Elastic, who I'll give a bit of a call out, and Nick can talk through all the details, they do very, very well. So their pricing model is based predominantly on infrastructure. They now actually have something which has just gone into beta, which is a serverless approach. So rather than having continuous ingestion running 24/7, actually it's only spun up when you need it. So at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when it's really, really busy, you might have 10 nodes running. At 3 a.m., you might have 2 nodes running, that kind of thing. So it's quite clever in how it works that way. And then, yeah, so the storage element as well. So the majority of your tools that you're going to buy off the shelf, maybe an EDR platform or email security platform, something like that, the retention on those probably is going to be 7 days, 30 days, sometimes 90 days. I know Microsoft 365, their audit log is 90 days retention. You cannot really extend that unless you put it into log analytics, and then all of a sudden it's expensive. So there needs to be a better option. So again, something Elastic does very well and we use a lot is smart storage sort of mechanisms. So that's things like data tiering. So you can, have a hot data tier where you can read that really, really quickly. But then after 30 days, it goes into cold storage. So it's still there, but it's quite slow to search. And then maybe after 90 days, it gets frozen. So what the frozen means is basically it's in a snapshot that sits in S3. If you need to query that data, it's automatically unzipped, quote unquote, put into the platform and it's there. But that is, kind of what should be looked at, because storage now is cheap. You can use storage quite cheaply if it's done right, but your legacy vendors and your legacy pricing models are still going to be on whatever they priced in 2020, And then multi-cloud support as well. So again, if you can ingest that source, so if you, for example, can have an ingestion node or ingestion point within AWS, within Azure, within GCP, if you're spread across all 3 clouds, you consolidate in one place and then integrate, that's going to reduce your cost by a factor of 10 as well. You aren't going to be sending terabits of data across multiple clouds, terabits of data on-prem through firewalls that you might control, etc. But actually try and use solutions that are as native to that environment as possible, and then ingest from there outwards. So AWS, for example, has a feature called Security Lake. It's a great way of getting all of your things like VPC flow logs, all of your WAF logs, all of your EC2 instance logs into one place, then ingest it into your log analytics platform or your SIEM or something like that. And you're going to cut your costs almost in half, whether if you're taking it from source. And what's the solution? Now, here's the sales pitch, right? if all of this seems either difficult, expensive, you can't do it in-house, so the cost to set up your own internal SOC to run a proper 24/7 shift, you need about 8 people. You're also going to need some continuity. You're going to need some holiday cover. You're going to need to, someone to actually build and design it. You're easily into 7 figures, even for a modest organization. I would estimate that we've spent probably over £2 million over the last 2 years in terms of what we've done from a build and a hiring point of view and stuff like that. So that's where MSSPs come in. Unless you are a tier 1 organization and a bank or something like that, running a proper SOC internally is going to be close to impossible. And some of the reasons why is, most MSSPs that are worth their salt have already built all of the detection use cases. We have over 1,000 different individual bits of logic that look at almost every platform under the sun, over 400 different integrations, whether that's, AWS related, Microsoft 365, Active Directory, you name it. And they've already invested in the technology. So we have, and again, the bit of trust here, but MSSPs have gone to the market, they've evaluated every platform under the sun and decided this is what makes sense for us to run our business. I will caveat by saying there are some MSSPs out there that will go for the cheapest solution and what they think can make the most margin. That then is down to yourselves to work out, the wheat from the chaff. But certainly what we've done is we've went to best in breed, CrowdStrike, Elastic, Recorded Future. Those are the kind of partners that we're working with, and a lot of very good MSSPs are working with. And they've done all that integration. So we have our own client portal where you can log in and you're going to get data about all of the products I just mentioned in one place. You get all of your incident report details, all of your metrics, all of your progress towards a framework or something like that, just one place. But under the hood, you've got those best of breed tech stacks that are backing it up. and they're training their staff. So a lot of, again, good MSSPs have got partnerships with the likes of Immersive Labs, which are on the barrier stand. Fantastic organization. They are built for security training, for technical security training, for SOC analysts and SOC engineers to sort of hone their craft. Again, I mentioned it at the start, but individual organizations doing the best in breed training for each component or each department is close to impossible. Whereas at an MSSP, that's all we do. So we have got, you know, investments into that. We have multiple platforms actually that we use, Immersive Labs being one of them. And maybe the most important one is the worst day you guys ever have when there's a major security incident where there's ransomware across your estate, when the world's burning and no one knows what to do. You know, for us, it's Tuesday afternoon. We've had this day in, day out, week in, week out. I've been involved in, you know, at least 10 significant ransomware scenarios, and none of them are the same. But you know, they're all you do learn how to deal with them after the first couple. So, and that's me. Hand over for Q&A, where I'll just put my headphones on so I can hear you. Has anyone got any questions?
Put your hands up if you have a question and we'll find a roving mic for you.
We also are, again, B12 stand. There's myself and a few of the rest of the team. We're happy to show you the platforms, go through some of the stuff, just have a general chat about security posture. And also the guys from Elastic are there as well if you want to, you know, completely out of us, but just have a look at what they guys do.
Any questions?
I will not leave until there's a question, even if it's what shoe size I am. So if you want rid of me, ask me a dumb question. And I was worried as soon as it was introduced that you could change the color to listen to someone else. I'd just see a sea of green and red, but we seem okay. No questions?
Kevin, what shoe size are you?
10. Yeah. Yeah.
You can go now. If there are no questions, please give Kevin a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.